other day on the show. So the team I have next up, they've been in the news all over the place for the last week now. So I figured what better time to just really dial in on them and focus in on a conversation about them. The San Francisco 49ers. These guys have been making, noise for at least 7, 8, 9 days now. Kyle Shanahan's looking for a quarterback. Everyone kind of assumed it when the trade was made last week with the Dolphins. And now, after their news conference they had the other day, it has been solidified. They are, in fact, going to look at bringing in a quarterback. Now, let's just kind of go over the, who's who are the options that they're realistically looking at here. Let me just take a sip of this. So, they're taking a QB at number 3. They are insisting that Jimmy G is in their future plans. Everyone's kind of gone with the idea that, they're doing kind of what, the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith. And if you want to go further back, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, the kind of passing of the torch type deal. That makes sense when you say it out loud, but when it comes down to the money, it doesn't. $25 million in cap space is what Jimmy G is kind of holding up over the 49ers right now in terms of money that they would have to, allocate for him for next season. That is a lot. Now, on top of that, if they cut him, they trade him, they release him, I believe they're only on the hook for roughly $2.5, close to $3 million in dead money. That's literally nothing. So, they're in a pretty solid position with with how expendable Jimmy G is, with them. And while they insist that Jimmy G is in the future plans, they have also said that that's barring any trade that completely blows them away. Now, I feel if you're the 49ers, if you really want to move Jimmy G, you've kind of blown your opportunity to really get a good amount of compensation for him. Now that everyone knows you're going after a quarterback, you don't believe in him. This devalues the quarterback. And I say this all the time, or with any position, not even just the quarterback, but with any position. When you make it clear that you don't value this guy for your future and that he's not somebody you plan on being with, he becomes far less valuable to the rest of the league. And on top of that, it only hurts the team going forward because now everyone's thinking, okay, you're looking for a new quarterback. Obviously, you're kind of unsure whether this new quarterback coming in or not is going to be completely ready, but you're making it very clear to the rest of the league that you don't think the guy that you currently have can do it for your team. Injuries was kind of the whole big thing cited with Jimmy G. It was not that he can't play. It's just he's missed 2 of the last 3 seasons, and that's true. But the one full season he played, he brought them to the Super Bowl. So it's a weird conundrum they're kind of in because you have it doesn't happen too often where you have a quarterback lead a team to a Super Bowl, but then on top of that, also couldn't stay healthy the year before and after. That's such a weird mixed bag. I don't think I've personally seen something like this in the NFL, so it is kind of weird to look at. Now, do I think that they end up getting anything good for Jimmy G if they get a trade? You're looking at a second or third round pick at best. I mean, maybe, a few weeks ago when the quarterback market was hot and teams were looking to move players around, could you have pulled in somebody with a first round, or not pulled in somebody, but could you have dealt him to somebody for a first rounder or maybe a high second rounder? Yeah, definitely. Now you're looking at mid, low second round, early thirds at best. I just think that at this point, with kind of how they've handled the whole situation, Jimmy G is less valuable to the league. Teams aren't really looking for quarterbacks as much right now. And on top of that, with the pro days going on, and we'll get on this in a little bit, the quarterbacks that are in the draft have only upped their stock going through this offseason with their pro days and being able to speak with the teams and everything. So you've kind of made your veteran quarterback that you don't believe in anymore look less valuable as these younger guys that are coming in, these prospects, are making themselves look more and more like they're, legitimate players that could actually lead a team for the next, 10 plus years at the quarterback position. Now, as far as suitors go, if they were to move them, it's going to be somewhere like New England. They're the heavy favorites as far as the rumor mill is concerned. The Bears are another team that I would look at as far as Jimmy G. I would say that he's somewhat of an upgrade over Andy Dalton. And I said this the other day, I personally don't think Andy Dalton is as bad as what some people are trying to make him out to be. He led the Cincinnati Bengals to 5 straight playoffs. Granted, that was, X amount of years ago, but that team was pretty bad when he was there. It was not very good, led by poor coaching. It was not a great team, and he was still just dragging them into the playoffs. I think he has some decent football left in him. Is he the answer or like the savior of the Bears? No, not really. But I would say Jimmy G, if he can stay healthy, is probably an upgrade over that. I can't really pick out any other teams just because I feel like the teams that are left at the quarterback or like the quarterback need position, I mean, everyone else is kind of settled at this point. Washington football team maybe would be another place he could go, but they just brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick to compete with Taylor Heineke. So I don't really see him going there. But I mean, if, the 49ers just want to move him and get what they can for him and they have the best offer, it could be a possibility. But I'm looking at like Bears and New England as probably the two more likely locations he ends up going if he ends up getting dealt. That's even if the 49ers end up dealing him, because obviously they keep insisting they're not going to move him anywhere. Outside of the quarterback position, though, for the 49ers, let's kind of talk about what else is going on with the team, kind of where they need to go draft-wise, and what I've kind of targeted for the team and, their needs and where, just the direction I feel that they should be heading as they head into the draft. So as far as the needs go, kind of from what I identified, interior D-line's a big one. They lost Solomon Thomas, which was a solid piece to their interior defensive line. On top of that, cornerback position's another one. They lost Richard Sherman, Akello Witherspoon, and a couple of just like not I don't want to call them no-name guys because that's not really how I want to say that, but just like lesser pieces for the team. And then on top of that, they lost wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. So you could argue interior D-line and cornerback for sure. Defense, just kind of shoring up some of those spaces that are open now with legitimate players in the second and third round. Wide receiver is another one you could look at. Obviously, there's Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but would you argue right now that either of those guys are true number ones? Maybe Deebo Samuel is, but, I think that the 49ers could do with a really big-bodied, just overall dominant type of pass catcher. I think that it would just only help the offense improve. When you look at the 49ers, you think of a really run-heavy team that is able to kind of just, do the short intermediate passing game where they can keep the ball rolling and then use those running backs to really in that strong offensive line, especially now that they have somebody like center Alex Mack anchoring them in the middle there. They can really pound the rock. So that's like the three places I think that they really need to go. Other pieces that they lost the running back as well. Tevin Coleman is gone. He went to the Jets. And then on top of that, Jerick McKinnon's still sitting out in free agency. I don't know if I would per se put running back at the top of the list of needs. They have Raheem Mostert, and he's looked really good. But, I mean, bringing in somebody in the third or fourth round that's a solid player that could just add depth back to that running back room is something they could look at as well. And then on top of that, I guess edge rusher is another way they could go. They brought in Samson Ebukam from the Rams. I don't know if they're maybe looking to continue to add to the edge. But, I mean, the pass rush has been a pretty dominant factor for San Francisco. Last year, obviously, things kind of fell off a little bit. They lost Nick Bosa. He's coming back. So hopefully that ends up working in their favor. I know Dee Ford's another one that he's working back from injury. So, as long as their injured players come back and are effective, the edge isn't really that necessary, but you can never have too much depth at edge because you always want to be able to pressure the quarterback, whether your starters are in or not. So those are a few places that I kind of narrowed out for San Francisco. There's a lot. This is a pretty, I don't want to say super strong draft for edge, but there are some players in there that you could go after. As far as like people they've already brought in, that kind of make these positions not as concerning, but still like a place to look at. They've brought in Zach Kerr for the defensive line over in the interior. He's a D-tackle type of person. They brought Trent Sherfield in, wide receiver, and then they also brought in a corner, Mark Fields, a cornerback from the Texans. So they've brought players in to address all these positions that I've brought out. But in my opinion, I think that you obviously your first pick's going to the quarterback. You've already made that very clear with those second and third round picks. And for a team that just traded like a haul of picks to move up, they still have an entire massive amount of picks going into this draft. They have a first, second, third, fourth, 3 fifth rounders, and then they're 6th and 7th. So, I mean, over the normal. You have 9 picks going into the draft. So as long as your scouting team's doing a really good job and you can hit on some of those later round players, fill in the rotational spots where they're just going to, obviously they're not starting, but they're going to be there for depth. And maybe you find a diamond or two in the rough in the later rounds. The 49ers are poised to come back as a really strong team, though. But those are the 3 positions they really need to work at, is that, that interior D line, bring in a cornerback, wide receiver. Richard Sherman still hasn't gone anywhere. I think he's a solid player still, whether the 49ers believe that or not. I know that they already told him they weren't going to bring him back, but as time goes on, if they don't fill the need, he wouldn't be a bad person to just bring back into the locker room just to lead that team. He is a savvy vet. He has a nose for the football. I think that, he's not going to be your number 1 corner, but he can handle a second, a number 2 or a number 3 fairly well, even at this late stage in his career. And I know he's already kind of, or from what I've read, considering potentially even moving to safety later on in his career, which I'm all for that. I love seeing aging corners that maybe can't quite keep up with some of these young, fast receivers and swapping over to the safety position. That would only help out the 49ers if he decided to stick around and do that there as well. So those are kind of the positions that I'm looking at for the San Francisco 49ers. They don't need a lot, but with that second and third round pick, you really want to find somebody that's solid or potentially even a starter with those picks, especially for the interior D line and a corner for sure. Wide receivers kind of like this is something we might need to address depending on how productive Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are actually going to be going into next season with whoever the quarterback ends up being over in San Francisco. Beyond